All right. Welcome back to America's Fractured Politics. I'm your host, Mark Mansour. Today we have a special guest. We're joined by Mike Brock, author of the Substack Notes from the Circus. Those of you who know Mike's wonderful work will appreciate this conversation. Those who don't, I think you're going to enjoy it. So let's jump in. How you doing?
Hey, Mark, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm happy to have you. I'm doing well. So let's start out with something current. Several people, including you, I think, have suggested that the Epstein files could be the thing that finally hits Trump where he hurts and may successfully kind of get him thrown off his game. What are your thoughts on it? Where do you think this is going?
I mean, I don't know where it's going. I mean, I'm not one who's going to make terminal predictions here for how this Epstein controversy will play out. What I have said and what I'll say here now is that I think it is absolutely an imperative for the opposition in this country to lean into this Epstein affair, not because the Epstein affair is more important than many other important things that are going on around the world. That we have a war raging in Eastern Europe and Ukraine. I think like what's happening in the South China Sea is deeply concerning. Not to mention the Middle East with Israel and Iran, but what this shows is something very, very important. This is a what my more philosophical side might refer to as an epistemic fracture in the narrative that brings together this political coalition that is threatening our constitutional inheritance. It demonstrates in plain view, I think, for everyone who's paying attention, that this administration is built on lies. You can't escape the conclusion that this is an administration built on lies when you look at the current situation with Jeffrey Epstein and what's going. I mean, it's like we're in a world where they've either been lying all along or they're lying now, and most people can intuit that. It's a simple thing that any average American can look at this fact pattern and realize that much is true. And so I think that's why this is such a powerful moment in our politics, and why I have suggested that the opposition should definitely lean into this, because demonstrating that this administration has weaponized lies in order to gain power is, I think, a critical opening for pro-democracy forces in this country to take advantage of. You should always take advantage of an opportunity to demonstrate that the emperor is wearing no clothes when they are in fact wearing no clothes. And so, I mean, that's like my position now. Like, I all of us, I think, are at this point, somewhat scarred from all of the scandals that we've lived through with Trump, only to see him come through the other side and survive and be re-embraced by his political coalition. This one is different, I think, because it's so central to the narrative that brought in a whole bunch of formerly disengaged voters, that really provided a lot of power and ammunition to Trump's political movement. And now that narrative has sort of like come apart, it's forced a large portion of his coalition to like ask really important questions. And so before. This feels different. It feels different. It feels different than almost anything we've seen before. I'm not like hopeful in the sense that I think this is going to like bring Trump down. One, I don't even know what that would mean, right? Like, let's say that this brings Trump down. I'm quite terrified of J.D. Vance. I think J.D. Vance is one of the most dangerous political actors in the United States today. And I think I could make a pretty compelling case that he's a far bit more dangerous than Trump himself. So I don't. I mean, yeah, maybe we can go down some of these threads, but my observation is this is different because it gets at the heart of a central part of the belief system that keeps a lot of people loyal to Trump. So that's important. And that being true, I think the opposition should lean into it. But secondarily, we need to consider what does this actually mean for the power dynamics in Washington, D.C., and how should we be thinking about that? And it's, we are. I mean, as the Democratic opposition in this country is in a bit of a catch-22 because Vance being the vice president, I think, is something that is deeply challenging to any notion of like simply removing Trump from power through impeachment or the 25th Amendment or what have you. I'm not sure that would be better. So I don't know how this ends. This is a very, I think it's a seminal moment of a kind in the political history of Donald Trump. that this obviously very close friendship that he had with Jeffrey Epstein through the 1990s, this very unexamined part of his life that people are now starting to pay attention to, is now getting some attention. But I mean, I think for like a lot of us, like, is anyone really surprised? I'm not like actually surprised. I mean, but to the extent that the MAGA coalition is being fractured by it, I mean, yeah, that's new. That's interesting.
Here's how I still like to see this play out. We talked about, what does it look like? Here's what it looks like to me. He starts losing people in his coalition. People start turning on him, especially if it turns out that the Wall Street Journal is onto something and more revelations come out. Then it becomes a case of them looking at him and saying, this guy's been lying to us about all sorts of stuff. And young girls, I think, are a bridge too far for a lot of people. Now you take that and you look at it from the standpoint of the price of meat going up, the price of eggs going up, the price of everything going up. And it looks like he's not kept any of his promises. And then there's this shit. So it weakens him and it makes it harder for him to get legislation through Congress because people are going to turn on the whole bunch of them. It's just ugly. It looks really, really bad.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, if it weakens him enough so that he can't do other stuff that really matters, then that'd be great.
Yeah, I think it was like Heather Cox Richardson, like recently. I was listening to an interview she was doing, and she pointed out something that was like really fascinating to me. That actually, like, it was ultimately a rape scandal that brought down the Ku Klux Klan. That the head of the Ku Klux Klan raped a white girl, and that was actually like one of like that was actually one of the main things that collapsed the Ku Klux Klan from the inside. So it's in some ways, like these are there's actually historical precedent for this kind of being the kind of thing that breaks a cult apart. And so there's also that.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I want to talk about a couple things that you've written about. You talked about the bastardizing of the word liberal. Expand on that a bit. Talk about that a bit.
I don't know if I ever said it's been bastardized, but I mean, it's certainly, I think, yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I consider myself a sort of revanchist liberal of a kind. I believe like very strongly in the liberal idea that I think this country was founded on, by the way, right? I mean, I consider the U.S. Constitution, was adopted in 1787 to be, sort of the first example of sort of a liberal basis of law. Some British folks might bristle at that and suggest that the the Great Revolution was maybe deserves that distinction when the Dutch put their person on the crown, and led to sort of a liberalization of politics in the British Isles. But that aside, I mean, I think that liberalism is misunderstood. I would, to give sort of my definition of liberalism, it's a far narrower definition than I think like the average person sort of ascribes to liberalism. I believe the liberal tradition is built on a few foundational principles. It's based on the idea that that human dignity is not negotiable. That we're all sort of like humans, and we all deserve our dignity. It does not, unlike say a libertarian position or the anarchist position, take the notion that collective, that there isn't such a thing as like collective rights, right? In an organized society. Classical liberals did not believe that, contrary to popular belief. I mean, our founders thought that the government should promote the general welfare. Those words are in the Constitution. That there are goods, there are public goods, and there are goods that are larger than any individual. And the liberal tradition sort of believes in the social nature of society as a sort of like grounding principle. Beyond that, I think liberalism is about, and this is sort of like my wheelhouse and something that I write a lot about, and I'm trying to offer both as you could say as a corrective, right, in a philosophical sense, but also I think a recapturing of this central notion of epistemic humility, which I would define as sort of understanding that like there is no one person that holds the truth. There is no one person that can hold the truth, because the truth is not something you measure. It is sometimes something you feel. Like sometimes what makes the truth has to do with human preferences and feelings and experience, right? Like it is true that I love my family, right? That's not something like you measure, right, with scientific instruments, but it's part of my truth. It's part of my capital T truth. And epistemic humility is the stance that says that, like, in order for us to live together, and to have greater cooperation, even if we have competition between us, competition of ideas, competition within commerce, and competition within sports, and all these like forms of productive competition that we have in society, towards the furtherance of sort of like greater human flourishing. That greater cooperation requires the ability for us to self-correct, for us to update our priors when we recognize that we got things wrong, and that we must always allow for the possibility that we are wrong, that this law that we passed was a bad law and we should repeal it or we should reform it. This applies to science too, right? I mean, epistemic humility is sort of central to science, right? If the evidence goes against the theory must fail, right? And this, I think, is like very, very central. I think actually should be thought of. I at least advance the argument as a liberal theorist that this is actually the central notion of liberalism, this notion of epistemic humility. And I think liberalism has sort of taken on a character in the public discourse that I think is, it's effectively meaningless, right? Like someone might say that universal health care is liberal. Like, I disagree. I mean, I think universal health care can be liberal if it's achieved through liberal ends. I think market-based health care can be liberal if achieved through like liberal ends. I would recognize both Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton as liberals in the small L sense in the tradition, right? Like, in fact, we referred to this period that ends in 1940, that begins in 1945, and probably I would say ends in don't know when you want to like markate it, like the election of Donald Trump in 2016, but we had something that sometimes is referred to as the post-war liberal consensus in American politics and beyond American politics. And there's like features of this in that span the world. And so I think you can properly understand like liberalism in those sort of like broader terms, these sort of broader agreements. And so like what we called conservatives 20 years ago were a form of liberal. They had liberal commitments at their core, even as they sought to advance, social and economic policies that, say, more progressive liberals found, abhorrent or were opposed to. But like this was essentially a liberal, a big tent, a liberal big tent that we had. And so in a sense, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, for most of your lifetime and mine, we're both liberal parties, essentially. Different types of liberal parties, and I think the extremists on both sides recognize this. This is why they call them the Uniparty, and basically is why the far left and the far right sometimes struggled to see the difference between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. There was a kernel of truth in what they were saying, yeah. Except a liberal, a small L liberal like me would suggest, well, no, that was sort of the liberal container, and I actually think the liberal container was a good thing, and it was kind of corrupted from the inside and fell apart, and we can talk about that. But that's how I define liberal. I don't define it as a sort of a set of policies. It's a ethical and political framework that imports these core notions of epistemic humility, of uncompromising belief in human dignity, a commitment to the idea that there should be one set of rules for everybody. We call this like the rule of law, the supremacy of law. And so any political institution or policy should not violate these sort of core ethical principles. That's what I define as liberalism. And I would suggest that any other definition of liberalism, at least, in its unqualified form, is a definition that I would tuffle with quite vigorously.
That's one of the most well thought out and articulated visions of liberalism I've heard. I would add one thing, and it kind of plays off something you said. The idea of a party today, a Trump party, a MAGA party, how Eisenhower and even Reagan would fit in such a party, it's almost laughable. There's no place for them.
Yeah, they wouldn't. There wouldn't.
There's no place for them.
No, I mean, the Republican Party is a fascist party today. I mean, it's people don't want to hear that, but I mean, I will defend that.
I'll
vigorously.
I'll defend it vigorously as well. It is a fascist party. Everything they do and everything they say proves it. You when people tell you that they mean something, take them at their word. Trump told us what he would be, and he's turned out to be exactly what he said he would be. So the people who voted for him should have been warned. Switch gears a bit. You talked about two concepts of wealth, comparing Bill Gates and Elon Musk. I found that intriguing. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to take like too much credit for this. I mean, like David Brooks has talked about this. Like, he wrote a book, right? Like, was it like Adventures in Bobo Land? Like, no, Bobo's in Paradise or whatever. And so, I mean, this isn't like, I mean, this sort of notion, right, of sort of different. There was this really kind of special moment, I think, in Western history, right, that really kind of came out of the Second World War, the Greatest Generation, that that really had this sort of sense of like noblesse oblige, right? That like even as you had these sort of like really big industrialists who got trust busted and stuff like that, the Carnegies and the, I mean, like there was a sense that like you had to like contribute back to civilization. And we sort of see that you have like, when you see the sort of like all these great institutions that have those famous names associated
Carnegie
with
Mellon,
them.
Rockefeller, etc.
Yeah, exactly. This sort of sense of noblesse oblige, which is sort of the obligations of the nobles. And Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, could be argued to sort of be sort of, contemporaneous embodiments of this sort of sense of like, fuck, I've been so lucky and I've gotten so rich and I need to like take all this wealth and I need to give back. And that is a sort of view of wealth that has clearly fallen out of favor with America's like, wealthy in many ways. I mean, it's certain. You look at someone like Elon Musk or any of these rich motherfuckers coming out of Silicon Valley today, and they're principally concerned with being able to turn their wealth into power. And that conception of wealth is something that is. I think it just directly violates the social contract. I think this sort of what some philosophers might call hyper neoliberal thought, this idea that or Randian or neo Randian thought, this idea that wealth, that if you have wealth, that's its own virtue, and that using that wealth for power is its own inherent good because you've sort of earned that. You've earned the respect. You should be thought of as a philosopher king for having amassed that amount of like economic power. And you see this. I mean, I've seen it up close. I mean, I really saw it when I was working with close to, I was working on technologies like Bitcoin and crypto, and sort of the last few years that I was working in the industry. And one of the things that was most spiritually draining for me was this hyper libertarian, hyper neoliberal notion that you see in these communities where like these people have just, I wrote a whole piece on this. It's the most popular piece I ever wrote. It's called "The Plot Against America." It was maybe in the first few dozen posts on my Substack. It was republished on the Unpopulist, and it's been republished in several publications that really kind of like details this sort of intellectual lineage in Silicon Valley, and how it really culminates in these crypto people where they've sort of just defined an entire new morality where wealth is morality. They're like, well, I mean, if someone gives you money, that's like that's like a democratic vote of a kind, and you should be able to sort of convert that moral authority into power. And in that, this is you see this thinking. There's this fellow Balaji Srinivasan. He wrote this piece called "The Network State." He runs this like network state boot camp in Singapore, where like basically, training people to set up like parallel governance structures, like outside like the reach of law, and to have these like pure capitalist fiefdoms. It's this really pernicious set of ideologies that a bunch of rich people have, cultivated amongst themselves to justify what was really just the justification of essentially maximizing their own ego and justifying the maximization of their own ego as virtuous based on this idea that economic success has some sort of like ethical import or matters to someone's ethical status. And that is just something like me that I think that I think it's a good thing that Bill Gates and Warren Buffett are giving away all their money to charity, and it's not surprising to me that these people that I'm talking about, these people who want to set up network states and escape the government and set up floating cities in the ocean with no regulations and all other crazy fucking ideas that like Peter Thiel has had along the way. He's working on this new thing called Praxis, in like Greenland.
And these are the people that back J.D. Vance, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, J.D. Vance is one of these people. I mean, he's a monarch. He has this sort of monarchist fantasy, this neo-cameralist ideology developed by Curtis Yarvin. Yeah, these people are. I mean, these people are. I mean, I know throwing around words like evil, will often get people to sort of like recoil and sounds like hyperbole. But I mean, whether these people are evil at an individual level, I mean, we can debate that, whether these people have just been confused and have sort of been sort of boxed into their own sort of sense of reality based on their own experiences and their own sort of relative sense of right and wrong. I know people that I would say are just genuinely confused, but I would say that they're serving what I would say is an evil agenda, at least measured from where I stand, which is a belief in this idea that we should have societies built on liberal values, and that wealth is not power. Wealth is a reward of a kind for being successful in the market, but this notion that wealth should confer the ability to dominate others and to define the contours of others' rights within society is a notion that I mean we should be willing to fight to the death to prevent ourselves from living in such a world. If our founders were here today, I'm sure they would agree, because they certainly saw a lot of this up front. I mean, people forget that there's this one of the other notions too that these people have, these libertarianish type people have, is they think that the classical liberals of the time, right, the Thomas Paines and the Thomas Jeffersons and the James Madisons of the world were somehow closer to them in their conception of the market. I mean, the truth is these men were actually quite suspicious of corporate power. They were dealing with a quasi-state-like entity called the British East India Company, which played a very central role in the lead up to the Boston Tea Party, by the way. And there is a reason why commercial regulation was an explicitly enumerated power in the U.S. Constitution, the Commerce Clause. And these men were I mean one of the very first things that Congress did, by the way, after the adoption of the Constitution in 1787, in 1780 they passed like a whole series of economic regulations targeting the railroads and the banks. Like 2 years into our constitutional order. I mean, our founders clearly thought commercial regulation was part of what the government should do. I mean, one of the first things they did was they forced all the railroads to adopt a standard gauge, so the railroads would be compatible with each other. And that was one of the ways that we were able to connect the East to the West, by forcing the private railroads to use a standard gauge, so different train sets could transverse across different privately owned railroads. We did that 2 years into the constitutional order in 1780. So this notion that the classical liberals were opposed to this idea of commercial regulation and telling businesses how to conduct business is just absolutely bullshit. It's a bullshit fever dream of a libertarian past that never existed in this country.
That's perfectly common among the people we're talking about, by the way. Go back to J.D. Vance for a second. The observation I would make about Thiel and Vance is that this is a consortium of people who have a fairly well-defined vision of what they think America ought to be, and it excludes hundreds of millions of people.
Yeah.
And it is to be feared. J.D. Vance is clever. where Trump is not. Trump has sort of a low cunning, I think, but Vance is a little bit deeper in the sense that he knows exactly what he's doing, and he's got an end game in mind, and he's far more disciplined, and he's got people behind him who are willing to harness that discipline and turn him into something that could create an environment, a political environment that would be deleterious to the public good. And 4 years of him, I think, would be a disaster. Now, having said that, I don't believe we'll see it. I think Trump will probably survive this term crippled. And I don't believe that a Republican will be elected in 2028. Maybe I'm engaging in wishful thinking, but I don't believe that'll happen. I think that enough has been done over the course of the past 6 months to scare people away. We'll see what happens. Another issue that pops up that you wrote about, I'm asked constantly, what should we do? As a result of my writings. I try to come up with answers, at least suggested answers. But a lot of people say, what should we do? I feel helpless. I feel like there's nothing we can do. I feel like there won't be free and fair elections. I feel like we're damned, that they've taken over and we have no choice. Do you hear a lot of that, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot about this actually. I mean, I think that, I mean, this may sound highfalutin to some people, but like, what you should do is live according to your values. I know that sounds trite, right? Timothy Snyder talks a little bit about this too, right? If you've read his 20 lessons on tyranny. It is very, very important, to maintain ethics and integrity in your own life, in your professional life, because institutions, even small institutions in society that are built on ethical principles, are foundations of resistance. We know this from like looking at the experience of like, the solidarity movement in Poland, in the 90s. We know this from experience in Portugal, right? The end of fascism there, the downfall of like Salazar, it's really, really important to think about like your immediate life, and one, to not let them take your joy away from you. Like, they want you depressed. They want you scared, because if you're scared and depressed, you're operating on fear. You're worried about like, not like if you spend your life in worry, then you're giving them all the power. So it seems like a trite thing, but holding on to your happiness, holding on to your ability to have a sense of humor, holding on to your ability to continue living your life according to your values, and honestly, in this moment, being your most authentic self. Holding on to that, because that is your authentic self. Being your authentic self is the apex of your freedom.
The sum total of that,
and the sum total of that. And so it starts there. I mean, and if everyone does that, then the fascists are going to really, really struggle, because like taking over a society is not straightforward, right? I mean, people have, like, you're seeing it happen now. Like, look what's happened. They brought the jackboots down on immigration, and you're seeing poll after poll after poll. Americans are getting like more and more disturbed by it. You now have you had a majority of Americans that supported these mass deportations when Trump was inaugurated, and now you have a majority of Americans who are opposed to them. Why? Because they're seeing these videos on social media, and they're seeing these like military style operations on the streets of New York City and Los Angeles and Chicago, and Americans are looking at this and they're saying to themselves, like, okay, this is not what I imagined. And so you have to have some faith that most non-sociopathic people, when they see human suffering, when they see like wanton disregard for human dignity, are going to feel something inside themselves, and they're going to have to try and reconcile that somehow. And that's why, like, I would say that people should have a lot of hope, and it should be the thing that kind of gives them that confidence to think, you know what, like I'm going to like keep living my life the way I believe like life should be lived. And you should be kind to people. People should be making more of an effort today to be out in their community, make eye contact when you order your coffee, and ask the person like how their day is going. These things matter to the psychological landscape of a free society. And these are the things that you should focus on. Because if we do this collectively, it will make it much harder for them to corrupt our society. Because if enough of us hold on to what it means to be a free person, then their job is going to be harder and harder, because they're drowning in their own incoherence. They're drowning in their lies that they've set up for themselves with Epstein. They're going to be drowning in the lies of their tariffs as prices are now starting to go up. We're now starting to see signs of inflation for real now. And people are going to have to reconcile those things. And so when you say, what should I do? Well, I mean, do the thing that you most want out of life, which should be to be your most authentic person. The thing that you have the most control over is yourself, and find a way to give yourself permission to be happy. Make new friends, like make friends, as Timothy Snyder says, put yourself in uncomfortable situations with unfamiliar people. That's what you should be doing. And that is that. I mean, we know this, right? Like, I mean, we know that we have inbuilt empathy as humans. We've seen this. You ever seen these like shows where you kind of bring neo-Nazis and like Jews together and you make them live into the same house? Like, I remember like seeing these like documentaries on A&E, and by the end of it, they were like both hugging, and person was no longer a neo-Nazi. It's because it's like, when you humanize somebody, when they're standing in front of you, right? Like, it's very, very hard for us to maintain these abstractions in our head, that allow us to hate when we're focused face to face, right? And we saw, you see stories of like Allied soldiers and Nazis having Christmas dinner to each other, like in World War II and stuff like that, and then becoming friends, and then like meeting each other after the war. It's part of the human condition. So hold on to the human condition. That's what you can do. Don't let them alienate us. Don't let them keep you scrolling in terror on your phone, on your couch at home. Get out there and build human connection. That is literally the biggest thing you can do. And that's exactly the opposite of what they want you to do. They want you at home, basically melting away behind a screen.
Russell Vaught wants you in terror. Russell Vaught wants you afraid to go to work. Russell Vaught wants you afraid of the administration, the regime, as I like to call it. But you're right. The bottom line is, if you are the best person you can possibly be, and translate that writ large, if everybody does that, you can create an environment where they can't succeed. But if we let them succeed by giving up, and if we let them succeed because we lack hope, then we're betraying ourselves in a fundamental sense.
This was the main reason why I've done what I've done. Like, I've like blown up my whole fucking career in Silicon Valley. I don't know who the fuck's going to hire me at this point. Like, given like, the public tirade that I've gone on against sort of like my former industry. But I mean, like, when people ask me like why I've sort of taken this stance, this very like aggressive stance, is because I want to make sure that like I'm setting an example of showing that like I'm going to be my most authentic self. I'm just going to put myself out there. I'm going to be uncompromising. I've lost, I don't know how many goddamn friends at this point, because like, one, they don't want to be associated with me because, like I used to work in the financial services industry and have like friends there, but they're regulated by the Trump administration, the FDIC, and the Fed, and all these organizations, the OCC. They're all controlled by the Trump administration, so they need to be able to like maintain like some sort of distance from someone like me. And so, I've blown all that up. And my hope is that hopefully that translates to bravery in some other people. I mean, I haven't seen much bravery, like honestly, from inside the corporate world. So I kind of feel isolated and alone, in that respect. But, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, is like, I hope that like, I hope my example eventually leads to more examples like me.
I think there are plenty like you. I try to live the same way. I know a lot of people on Substack do. And there are a lot of people that are afraid of what's going to happen to them. I'm not. I think that there are plenty of people out there that are more prominent than both of us are, who are in the firing line right now. I don't think they have time to go
Yep.
after all of us. But at the end of the day, we have to do what we do because we're true to ourselves, and you can't let them win. You just can't let them win.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very Camusian on this. Yeah, I mean, I think one must be willing to die for their freedom if they want to maintain their freedom.
Well said.
And well, I mean, it's not. I mean,
it's the bottom line.
I don't. I mean, it's. I mean, it is the bottom line. It's also Timothy Snyder's 20th lesson on tyranny. So I'm borrowing from him in this conversation with reckless abandon.
You could do worse.
Yeah, but I mean, I think. Yeah, I think that I just think that that's true. I mean, I don't know that we're going to win this fight. I mean, if someone asks me, I mean, obviously these things are, we're in a very complex situation. Our geopolitical situation, like vis-a-vis the rise of China, is deeply concerning. There's people that I trust and respect in that world, and I was pretty well connected to groups that have been trying to help Ukraine and over the past like few years. And some people I like know and respect in that world think that China could really like do something crazy, like invade both Russia and Taiwan as early as 2027, like based on some of the planning and moving that they're doing. And these are real X factors, I think, right now for the West.
We're doing maneuvers in the South China Sea.
Yeah. And it's not clear to me that we have any power to stop China's rise right now, given how weak politically America and Europe have become in the world. So this is something that I think the opposition also needs to be thinking about. We need to be walking and chewing gum at the same time. We need to really be thinking about like the geopolitical dynamics that are also shaping the nature of our threat to human freedom and dignity right now. So we have enemies inside and outside right now, and revanchist liberals like me and you are surrounded, and we need very desperately to figure out how we build an effective coalition very, very quickly. And I know I've given my opinions on what that should be, on how we should go about doing that. But I do think we are running out of time in the face of illiberal dangers that are coming at us from many different angles.
I think we're living on borrowed time right now, as a matter of fact. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I love this country. I have no intention of abandoning it. I think that I think this country's worth fighting for. I think it's like very, very special. And I think while I am really like proud of like what this country has been, I think we also need to think towards the future of what American renewal looks like. And I do think this has sort of been a major shift for me since Trump was elected. I do think liberals need to sort of move beyond being on institutional defense and really start thinking more about institutional renewal. Like like rather than thinking about how do we save these institutions, we now need to start thinking about how do we build new institutions and how do we rebuild these institutions for the 20th century, because we have to admit they were kind of broken and not working before Trump started burning them down. And so now that he's burnt them down, I think we need to have sort of a more generative view of like what we're going to do with power if we get it back in 2028.
I agree. I can't thank you enough for coming on. This has been great. It's been stimulating. It's been a salve for the soul. And I hope the people who are listening feel the same way.
Well, thank you for having me anytime.
It's been my pleasure.